You keep asking yourself why this person showed up in your world. The one who pulls you close, then disappears for days. The one who says they care but won't let you all the way in. And somewhere between the confusion and the heartbreak, you've convinced yourself it's random. It's not. There's something about you, specifically you, that drew this avoidant attachment style into your orbit. And what I'm about to reveal is going to shift how you see not just them, but yourself. Here's what most people miss. They think avoidants choose partners randomly, that they just stumble into relationships and create chaos wherever they land. But attachment styles don't collide by accident. There's an invisible magnetism at play, and you were chosen for very specific reasons. Reasons that have everything to do with what you're carrying inside. Let me show you how this actually works. Think about the last time they opened up to you, even just a little. Maybe they shared something vulnerable at 2 in the morning, something they said they'd never told anyone else, and you felt chosen, right? Special, like you were the one person who could reach them. That moment wasn't an accident. You were placed in their life because you possess something they desperately need but can't ask for directly. Avoidants are drawn to people who have an abundance of what they've learned to suppress: emotional availability, the ability to express needs, vulnerability that doesn't feel like weakness. You represent everything they've been taught to fear and everything they secretly crave. You're walking proof that emotional openness doesn't equal destruction. But here's where it gets interesting. You weren't just placed in their life to be some kind of emotional teacher. That's the story we tell ourselves because it makes the pain feel purposeful. The real truth is more complex and honestly, more empowering. The avoidant in your life is a mirror, not a perfect reflection, but a contrast mirror. They're showing you where you've been abandoning yourself. Every time they pull away and you chase harder, every time they go silent and you over-explain, every time they set a boundary and you negotiate it away, you're seeing a pattern that existed long before they showed up. Let that sink in. Most people who attract avoidance have one thing in common. They're givers who never learned how to receive. They're fixers who ignore their own brokenness. They're so comfortable meeting others halfway that they've forgotten what standing firm in their own space feels like. The avoidant didn't create this pattern. They just revealed it. I know a woman named Sarah who dated an avoidant for 3 years. Every weekend, he'd make plans, then cancel last minute. She'd spend hours trying to figure out what she did wrong, analyzing every text, every conversation, looking for the moment she pushed him away. One day, her therapist asked her something that changed everything. When was the last time you canceled? Plans because you simply didn't feel like going? Sarah couldn't answer. She'd been so conditioned to be the dependable one, the flexible one, the understanding one, that she'd lost access to her own no. The avoidant wasn't teaching her to accept less. He was revealing that she'd already been accepting less from herself for years. Here's the thing. Avoidants have a radar for people who won't hold them accountable, not because they're manipulative masterminds, but because they're terrified of engulfment. They need to know they can disappear without consequences. They need to test whether you'll still be there when they come back. And if you've never learned to walk away from people who don't meet your needs, you become the perfect candidate. So, what do you do with this information? First, stop seeing yourself as a victim of their attachment style. You're not being punished. You're being given information about yourself that you couldn't see any other way. This relationship, painful as it is showing you exactly where your boundaries have been negotiable and where you've been performing emotional labor you never signed up for. Second, recognize that you were placed in their life just as much as they were placed in yours. While you're trying to figure out how to make them feel safe enough to love you, consider this. Maybe they showed up to make you uncomfortable enough to finally love yourself, to stop waiting for someone else's approval before you decide you're worthy. But here's where most people get stuck. They hear this and think, okay, I need to become more avoidant. I need to care less, text back slower, play it cool. That's not what this is about. Becoming avoidant doesn't heal anxious attachment. It just covers it up with different dysfunction. What you're actually being called to do is something much harder. You're being asked to stay open while simultaneously staying rooted in yourself, to remain emotionally available without making someone else's. Emotional unavailability, your responsibility. To love without losing yourself in the process. Think about this scenario. Imagine you're at a park and there's a bench. An avoidant sits on one end of the bench, as far from the center as possible. The typical anxious response is to slide toward them, to close the gap, to prove through proximity that you're safe. But every time you move closer, they scoot further away. Soon you're both at opposite edges, and the distance is wider than when you started. The radical move is to sit in your spot. Not in the middle demanding they meet you there, not on their end crowding them, but in your actual spot, the place that feels true to who you are and what you need. And then you let them decide if they want to move closer. You let them sit with the space between you without making it mean you don't care. That's terrifying if you've been taught that love requires constant adjustment, constant accommodation, constant proof. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. An avoidant texts you after 3 days of silence with something casual like, "Hey, how's it going?" The old pattern would be to respond immediately with warmth and questions, pretending the silence didn't hurt, giving them a clean slate because you're afraid if you mention it, they'll disappear again. The new pattern is honesty without punishment. I'm doing okay. I'm not going to pretend the silence didn't sting, but I'm also not asking you to explain it. I just need you to know I'm building a life that feels good whether you're in it or not. Then you actually do that. You make plans, you invest in friendships, you stop putting your life on pause waiting for their next burst of closeness. Here's what most people miss about that approach. They think it's a strategy to make the avoidant chase them. It's not. It's the beginning of you choosing yourself regardless of what they do. Because the painful truth is, you can't control whether an avoidant heals. You can't love them into security. You can't be understanding enough, patient enough, perfect enough to make them ready. But you can decide that you're no longer available for situationships disguised as relationships. You can decide that you deserve someone who doesn't need an encyclopedia of psychology articles to figure out how to show up for you. Now, some of you are wondering if the avoidant can change. And the answer is yes, but not for the reasons you want to hear. Avoidants change when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of intimacy. Not when you love them harder, not when you prove you're safe, when they decide, independently, that their patterns are costing them the life they actually want. Your job isn't to create that pain or manufacture that realization. Your job is to be honest about what you need and mean it when you say you won't accept less. But here's where it gets really interesting. Sometimes the person who's placed in an avoidance life isn't meant to stay. Sometimes you're there to be the catalyst for their growth while they're the catalyst for yours. And the relationship has an expiration date neither of you saw coming. That doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it purposeful in a way that has nothing to do with forever. I knew a guy named Marcus who dated an avoidant for 2 years. She'd get close, panic, pull back, repeat. He tried everything, gave her space, asked for clarity, suggested therapy. Nothing shifted the pattern. One day he realized he'd been so focused on unlocking her that he'd locked himself away. He'd stopped writing, stopped seeing his friends, stopped doing the things that made him feel alive, all because he was waiting for her to be ready for the relationship he wanted. When he finally ended it, she told him he was giving up too easily, that she just needed more time, and he said something that changed both their lives. "I don't doubt that you might be ready someday, but I can't keep watering a garden in the hope that eventually flowers will grow while my own garden dies from neglect." 6 months later, she reached out to thank him. She'd started therapy. She was working on her attachment patterns. But she also said, "I don't think I would have done this work if you'd stayed. Your leaving was the first time someone showed me that my fear of intimacy has consequences, that people with healthy attachment don't wait forever." Let that sink in. Sometimes being placed in an avoidance life means being the one who loves them enough to stop accepting the crumbs. being the one who walks away not out of anger, but out of self-respect, being the proof that emotional unavailability doesn't get rewarded with infinite patience. So, what do you do right now, today, with the avoidant in your life? You get radically honest with yourself about what you're actually getting from this relationship, not what you hope it will become, not the potential you see in them, what actually exists right now. Are you happy? Do you feel chosen? Do you spend more time confused than connected? Do you make excuses for behavior you'd never tolerate from anyone else? Write it down, all of it. The good moments and the painful patterns. Then read it as if your best friend wrote it about their relationship. What would you tell them? Here's the thing about being placed in an avoidance life. It's not a life sentence. It's an invitation to see yourself clearly, to understand why you've been willing to settle, to recognize the ways you've been emotionally unavailable to yourself while demanding availability from someone else. The avoidant isn't your enemy. They're not even really the problem. They're the teacher you didn't ask for, holding up a mirror to the relationship you have with yourself. And once you see it, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. You have two choices from here. You can stay and consciously work on your own attachment patterns while holding boundaries about what you'll accept. Or you can leave and work on those patterns without the constant trigger of someone who's not ready to meet you where you are. Both are valid. Both are hard. Neither guarantees the outcome you want, but both guarantee growth if you're willing to be honest about what this relationship is revealing about you. Think about this. Every person who's ever loved an avoidant eventually reaches a crossroads, the moment when you realize you've been trying to earn something that was never yours to earn. Their readiness, their openness, their full presence. Those things aren't prizes for good behavior. They're choices only they can make, and your presence in their life, whether for a season or a lifetime, was never about fixing them. It was about waking yourself up to your patterns, to your worth, to the reality that you deserve someone who doesn't need a manual to figure out how to love you back. You were placed in their life for a reason, but maybe, just maybe, they were placed in yours. So you'd finally stop abandoning yourself for people who can't show up. So you'd learn that being chosen isn't about being perfect. It's about being yourself and trusting that the right person won't need you to be anyone else. That's the emotional truth nobody tells you. The avoidant didn't just happen to you, and you're not powerless in this dynamic. You're the only person who gets to decide when enough is enough, when you're ready to stop translating someone else's fear into your own inadequacy, when you're ready to build a life that doesn't pause every time someone pulls away. The question isn't why you were placed in their life. The question is, what are you going to do now that you understand what this placement was meant to teach you? Because that answer, that choice, that's where your power lives. Not in making them ready, in making yourself unavailable for relationships that require you to be less than whole. And maybe that's the whole point.